Shabbat Shalom. I'm wishing us all a peaceful Shabbat, but I know that so many of us are carrying pain about the violence in Israel and in Gaza right now. And it's a Shabbat when I'm finding it hard to feel any shleimut, any wholeness, when our world feels so broken. So my invitation this evening is merely to stay connected, to keep breathing, and to remember that we are not alone. Remembering that we are interconnected can be a comfort, but it also reminds us that our choices reverberate and impact many others. Perhaps nothing demonstrates our interdependence with each other and with everything else more than what is happening right now to our world. Our burning fossil fuels, as we did in many of the cars that drove here tonight and has powered much of the electricity that's lighting this room, extracting and burning fossil fuels is pouring heat-trapping climate pollution into our atmosphere, bringing stronger storms, devastating floods, food scarcity for folks on the front lines here and around the world. We don't always like to think about it, although in the past year, perhaps you've had a moment that drove home for you that we are living in a damaged climate. A strong storm that caused flooding, a scary hot day in the summer, having to breathe wildfire smoke here on the East Coast. We are the first generation to be experiencing the climate crisis and the last generation that will be able to do anything about it. In a society and economy built on burning fossil fuels, a system in which all of us are still participating, focusing on the climate crisis and what we should be doing about it can feel overwhelming. The question of how we find our way in this moment, how we think about our place as people in a world in climate crisis, is fundamentally a moral and spiritual question. It's a question that belongs right here, on this bima, inside this temple. One of the texts to which Jews sometimes turn for climate guidance is this week's Torah portion, the story of Noah and the flood. For so many of us, this story is like such a strong image in our minds, often from childhood. Can you think for a minute if you've had any Noah's Ark pictures or songs, toys? That little boat, the pairs of animals, the dove with the branch, the rainbow. Think about, my mom said she sang a song about the Arky in the JCC camp in the 1950s. These depictions are often whimsical and cheerful, and in part because they're so ubiquitous, in some ways Noah's Ark has become our dominant cultural narrative for how to navigate ecological disaster. And Jewish climate activists participate in this, including me. For years, I had a poster up in my office that used Noah's Ark to advocate for the Endangered Species Act. In 2014, Rabbi Arthur Waskow and many other faith leaders attending the People's Climate March in New York literally traveled through Manhattan, down Broadway, in an ark that was rolling along. But as we read the story of Noah on this Shabbat, I want to share some of the most transformative Torah I've learned over the last few years, which is actually a warning to handle this story with caution. Rabbi Julia Watts-Belzer at Georgetown sees danger in letting this little boat become our climate story. The pictures in our minds are focused, or that toy that you played with, is focused on deck, right? It narrows the frame to the boat itself, the creatures who made it and who will survive the storm. But the fact is, the boat Noah builds is way too small to do anything but preserve a remnant. Lots of folks can't make it on board. Julia Watts-Belzer describes it as a gated community. While selected specimens, 2 perfect goats, 2 special sparrows made it aboard, the implication of the story is that every other goat and every other sparrow has been left to drown. Not whimsical or picture book fare at all. We're told that Noah was selected because he was righteous in his generation. And when we only look at the boat, it's like we're imagining that we made it on board too, as well, that we only have to concern ourselves with what's on board, that we are righteous enough to get one of those few tickets out of destruction. And we, like Noah, kind of implicitly accept that we're leaving behind everyone else to perish. So this week's Torah reading tells a story that is ultimately a failure to prevent the world's destruction, largely a failure. If we take this story as our climate story, we have already accepted defeat for most of the places and people and creatures we love. If we choose this story, we might not attend to the suffering of other people and non-human animals, especially if we're hustling to be righteous enough to get whisked out on that little boat and make sure we elbow out of the way anyone else from getting our seat. So my invitation tonight is to try in our heads and hearts to get off this boat. Let's set down small boat theologies that assume we can only survive if we're that one righteous guy who builds an utterly inadequate vessel and leaves almost everything and everyone else behind. If we take that picture from your childhood bedspread or storybook or toy away, though, we need something as vivid and powerful with which to replace it. And I'm going to suggest tonight, and I'm standing in front of the ark, I'm going to suggest tonight that the image we bring to mind is of a Sefer Torah, this Torah scroll itself, and specifically how we encounter and position ourselves and what the spirit with which we approach the Sefer Torah. In Jewish communities, we experience so viscerally the sanctity of the Torah scroll. Our communities enact this sanctity in so many ways you can probably think of, right? We place it in a separate ark at the front of our prayer spaces. We stand, if we can, when it is uncovered, adorning it with beautiful clothes, touching it reverently with the yad pointer and not directly, kissing our talit fringe or a book when we touch it at one remove. A Sefer Torah is sacred, and we make that sanctity real in Jewish communities by treating the Sefer Torah with tremendous reverence and care. It's become so much a part of us that I think for a lot of us, even the idea of a torn or damaged Torah scroll causes almost physical pain. Last week, we read Bereshit, the story of God's creation of the world through speech. In a Hasidic work of philosophy called the Tanya, Rabbi Schneur Zalman suggests that the actual letters of the words with which God created the world are still present inside and animating the elements of creation. What would it mean if the words with which God created our world let the earth sprout vegetation, let the earth bring forth every kind of living creature? What if those letters, that God's speech, was still present in every tree, on every mountain, in every blade of grass, in every valley, in every stream that flows into a river into the ocean? If the natural world around us is God's word in the world, even now, then every oak tree and goldenrod and blue jay and person is themselves a page of Torah, a parchment which manifests revelation. Where the image of Noah's boat zooms us way in, leaving so much outside of the sphere of our concern, the Tanya's image asks us to stand and turn to face and honor the sanctity of every tree and beetle and person, and to attend to them with great gentleness and care. What if, when coal mining companies blow apart mountains with explosives and dump the waste rock in valley streams, what if those mystical Hebrew letters of the words with which those mountains and streams were created are being destroyed as well? What if, when hydraulic fracturing for gas is injecting chemicals directly into the groundwater of our neighbors, releasing heat-trapping methane gas, what if the revelation contained in that rich soil and strong rock were being fractured also? What if, when pipelines endanger communities and power plants dirty the air, making people sick, we knew that the divine speech that had created those human beings was itself being torn and disrespected? And what if Noah had known in his kishkas, in his gut, the true sanctity of his neighbors and of all creation, so much so that he could only hear a different question? What will we need to come together to build something to save all that is sacred? What if we, too, insisted that everyone and everything is worthy of our greatest protection and care? I don't know the answer to this question. What is the vessel we will need to build together to come through the climate crisis to something better? But I do know that through Interfaith Power and Light, many people are coming together to ask that bigger question, and I invite you to join the Tzedek Isaiah team tonight to be a part of that good work. Alongside the Noah story, I want to invite each of you to practice bringing the reverence and care with which you approach a Torah scroll to the other beings you encounter. The vessel we'll need to navigate this time is one that is not built yet. We don't yet know all that can be saved. But I do know that we can only be righteous in this generation if we become fierce and reverent protectors of all that is holy. Shabbat Shalom.